Hello, welcome to another MOSH Hit the Floor audio review. My name's Jay, I'm the assistant editor of MOSH. It is absolutely freezing in my bedroom, which is fitting because we're going to review some black metal. Band in question called SPEKTR. They are from Paris, formed in 2000. They've had 4 studio albums. This is their 4th, The Art to Disappear. It follows on from Cypher, which was released in 2013. Band members are, these are pseudonyms, so if I say these wrong, please don't get angry. KLK, who is on vocals, drums, samples and programming, and Huth, who's on vocals, guitars, bass, samples and programming. It's not just your standard black metal album. The Art to Disappear is sort of experimental black metal industrial ambient album. It's largely instrumental. There are 9 tracks. 4 of them act as breaks or soundscapes. They're kind of more mood interludes. These are Again, Kill Again, Soror Mystica to a lesser extent, and The Only One Here. The first track, Again, is kind of a creepy backmask sample electro loop. And that leads us into the second track, which is really the first track proper. It's called Through the Darkness of Future Past. It starts off with a weird edited sample, and an easy drum shuffle brings you into it, and then some syncopated chugging chords sort of grate away at you. The rhythm seems to break apart a little bit. There's a lot of layers going on that seem kind of disconnected. The sample ends, and then there's a more standard black metal tremolo riff. There's some electro sounding drums, kind of like almost a black metal Oceano in the fact that they're really intense but not as bad as Oceano are. There's a broken groove, but one that you can definitely bob your head along to in amongst the blast beats, and it becomes more stable and more sort of regular black metal as it goes along. You start to feel it and get into it a bit more as the track progresses. A switch in your head sort of clicks on and you start to understand what they're trying to do here. There's a lot of creepy tones and some jabs of whining guitar, some big shuddering tom fills that are very satisfying. What you'll notice as you go through the album is that SPEKTR mix things up a lot. You know, they don't stick with one thing. There's not the repetition that other bands seem to rely on in the black metal genre. They're not afraid to switch things up and do something a little different. Kill Again, the third track, is another sort of sample driven one. It sort of skips over itself. There's some jangling chords and some skittering electro touches. It's a bit dragged into sunlight in places with the reliance on samples over vocals. From the terrifying to the fascinating, starts off very lo-fi. It's not lo-fi in the traditional black metal sense. It's not willfully badly recorded. There's quite a lot of studio polish here, but not too much. There's still sort of grit and lo-fi approach to things. It bursts into better quality suddenly, and there are blast beats and tremolo picking, of course, and there's a sense of mania. It's very frantic in its pace, a bit more straightforward black metal, and then it changes tack completely and drops into a dizzying cascading riff. There's almost a trapcore electro breakdown right in the middle. There's a lot of throbbing, gristly synth waves. It kind of makes you question whether the electro vibes work in amongst all of the black metal stuff. There's some nice stuttering cymbal and snare hits, and then back into some more chug. It's kind of, there are comparisons that you can draw between bands like Death Heaven and SPEKTR because they're doing something a bit different and mixing up the sort of tried and true black metal stylings, but Death Heaven rely more on repetition and shoegaze, whereas these guys rely more on electro and ambient. That day will definitely come. Starts with speaker noise that throbs and pulses into a big sample drum beat. It sounds almost 80s synth rock in a way, like a kind of weirdly hip hop beat. There are groans of synths and then things explode into the main riff with some nice 1-2 deliberate snare kick patterns. It fades back into the constant kick drum blast beat stylings, and the main riff sort of comes back after a grinding bass and guitar line. It's very buzzsaw sort of trebly sound to the guitars, which is standard of the genre. There's a big sense of the dramatic here. Soror Mystica is a storm of grating and rippling noise, drops in and back out and builds up by layers. It makes you feel uneasy, it's very atmospheric, and there's a lot of distant whispering going on amongst the roaring. Your Flesh is a Relic. It starts off with sampled screams, bursts into some frantic picking, grating the skin off your very face. It's quite intense. It's a whirlwind of force. The drums keep pace and whip things along, and then it goes into a big held note that lets the electronica creep back in. There's an almost dubstep break here, lots of big overbearing synth tones. The guitar comes back in, then fades out, and the samples repeats the beep loop that was there to a sonorous finish. The only one here is more of a tension builder. It's quite dramatic. It builds up to a wall of sound, and then some brass touches come in, almost like a very dramatic old sort of 1920s 30s movie soundtrack, something like Jason and the Argonauts. It's quite disquieting, and then it loops back in to a groove. The Arts Disappear, the title track, is probably the most interesting one here because it starts off with some totally unexpected jazz drumming and some nice smooth organ and piano tones. This is really like an old school lounge jazz feel. The grooving main riff bites in. There's some really prominent bass and bass slides used here to great effect. A big chuggy palm muted riff drops down into a more simplified version of itself, and then some really punishing double bass and tremolo kicks in. It switches up again into a sort of sub-thrash D-beat section with some galloping drums, and then stops. There's a vocal sample, and then the jazzy drum shuffle comes back in again. It's very moody, and then it goes back into some sort of slower, more menacing black metal rather than the more frantic stuff that we've been used to. The guitar groove drops back in to a big driving line, and then back again into that jazz lounge feel to drive us home. So, very interesting album. You might not appreciate it fully on the first listen, might be a bit more of a grower than a shower, but it's very interesting, sitting alongside the likes of Immortal Birds, trying to mix up the black metal genre, combine it with some more interesting elements. So yeah, get your 2016 off to a good start, treat yourself to some SPEKTR. I'll give it an 8 out of 10.